Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jaeger Anderson of Jaeger Anderson Photography, and today I wanted to talk about your photography journey and why you might want to start, and some tips to help you along the way. Some things that have helped me over the past 7 years. I think it's really important to understand why you want to pursue any profession or any interest or any hobby. And understand, are you doing it just for fun? Are you doing it because you're trying to learn something new? Are you doing it to try to make some money? Are you trying to be rich and famous? And I think it's really important to do that because if you focus on what you value versus, extrinsic motivation, you're more likely to continue with it when things get bumpy or when, things ebb and flow, like say during a pandemic. I wanted to do photography because I like that it synthesizes two loves of mine, which is technology and creativity. I used to do, set design in college, and I also did it in high school, and I really enjoy that because there's a technical element, right? You have to know how to weld, you have to know carpentry, you have to know how to paint, and there's also this creative element, right? You want to create sets that are dynamic and that tell a story, and so there's this synthesis between creativity and technology. Naturally, photography became an interest of mine because it synthesizes that creativity and that technology, right? You have to know how to expose your subject. You have to understand shutter speed and aperture and different cameras and camera settings. And if you're doing videography, you have to understand sound and lighting. And so there's a huge amount of technical understanding that you have to know, but you also have to be able to tell a story either with an image or with a video. And so that synthesis of technology and creativity. So that's my tip number one. Identify why you would want to do photography and make sure that you're intrinsically motivated and not extrinsically motivated. Otherwise, you might not hold on to it. Tip number two, shoot a lot. Now, I know this might seem like an oversimplification, and it kind of is, but it was one of the most enlightening things that my first photography instructor told me. After I presented her with a bunch of photos that I took, she said, "These are great, but they would have been so much better if you had just kept with the subject and kept shooting." And at the time, I was doing a lot of event photography. I still do a lot of event photography. But what I would do is I would take my camera and I would shoot a person, I would photograph a person, and I would photograph them, and then as soon as I thought I had it, I'd just move on. So I'd click and move on, click, move on, click, move on. And that's not really helpful because so much can happen, as you know, if you're a photographer, in that split second between one expression to another expression. So just shoot a lot. So in one sense, the idea is stay with your subject, and as soon as you think you're done with the subject, shoot a little more. Keep photographing that subject, whether that is a still life or a product, or whether that is, doing event photography, wedding photography, or portraiture. Just go a little bit further after you say, okay, I'm done, and just push yourself a little further. So not only do you want to stick with the subject and keep photographing and move beyond that comfort zone of when you think you're done, but you also just want to take a lot of photographs in general, so that when you're shooting every single day, day after day, you will, as a result, become a better photographer. There's just no way around it. You're going to learn. So take lots of photos. Tip number three, be a good editor. I think one of the things that separates a good photographer from an excellent photographer is their ability to edit. Much like in writing, I think it's important to know the fundamentals of photography, exposure, lighting, and composition. However, if you don't know how to use Photoshop, if you don't know how to color correct, if you don't know how to manipulate things with a pen tool, then you're going to be at a huge disadvantage to those people who have studied those things. I think what sets me apart as a professional photographer is the fact that I've dedicated a huge amount of time to learning Photoshop, to learning Capture One, to learning Lightroom, and so that I can create the kind of photos that I imagine in my head, even if they're not fully represented in real life. And I think that's an important skill to realize, to not only take something at face value and be like, well, it's kind of gross or whatever, and then realizing that isn't the final product, it's what you can do in post-production that is the final product. So become a great editor, and your photography and your experience and your clients will love you all the more for it. Tip number four, find someone who is better at photography than you. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I am good friends with Todd Balfour. He has been a close friend of mine and mentor for the past 7-8 years now, since I started getting into photography. And whenever I have a question about photography, photography, whether it's a technical issue, or if I just want some critical feedback on a photo I've taken, I just text him and be like, hey, what do you think about this? And I get that feedback. And I think it's really crucial, especially when you're starting out in photography, to have somebody that you can bounce ideas off of and who is willing to sort of guide you in the right direction with regards to your technical skills, composition, your professionalism, and whatnot. So find a mentor, find someone who can help you grow and who can help you learn, and then through that relationship, you're going to become a better photographer. Tip number 5. Now this is one that I struggle with, but share your work. We live in an age right now where it's not enough to just be good at something. You can be an exceptional painter, a photographer, a musician, but if you're just doing it for yourself, now granted, you can do anything for yourself and enjoy it. I'm not saying that every hobby you have, you need to monetize, but if you want to make a business out of photography or music or any other creative field, then you have to share your work. Now that's scary and it demands a lot of vulnerability on your part, but you have to do it. You have to have a social media presence. You have to have a portfolio that's represented somewhere online, ideally on a website, and you have to be kind of gung-ho about sort of, throwing yourself out there and being your best spokesperson. Otherwise, it's going to be very challenging for you to get your work out there and get paid for your work. So share your work. I'm saying that for myself as well. All right, so tip number 6 is do work for free or at a severe discounted rate. Now, I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but I think it's really important when you're starting off to just try to get as much experience as possible. So my first wedding that I ever photographed, I did for $400. And I think that's really important because they didn't want to spend a lot of money. They liked the photos, the photos that I kind of presented to them, my portfolio of photos. And they weren't looking for anything fancy, something that was going to appear in like The Knot or anything like that. And it gave me an opportunity to push myself and become a wedding photographer and sort of, do it live, if you will.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
And I think that's really important. And I wouldn't have been able to do that had I charged, $2,000-$3,000 because my photography portfolio wasn't representative of someone who could charge that much. Now, it is now, but at the time when I'm starting off, I couldn't do that. And so whenever you go into a particular discipline of photography, whether that's food photography or, newborn photography or boudoir or whatever, I think it's really important to undercut your rates or simply do something for free so that you can learn and so that you can practice. And I think that's essential rather than being like, I'm a professional food photographer and therefore I must be a great wedding photographer. And I just don't think that's the case. I think that you need to practice in different fields and that one of the ways you do that is by undercutting your prices, doing something for free, getting some experience, learning, and then charging more later on. All right, tip number 7, you don't have to be perfect to try. Much like this video that's very ad hoc and very crazy, I'm waving my hands a lot. I know I'm gonna go back to my computer and there's gonna be tons of stuff that I do not like about this video, but the important thing is that you do it. Just do it, right? Like the Nike slogan. I'm sure you've heard the quote by Voltaire that says, perfection is the enemy of the good. And that's what we're trying to do, right? We're just trying to produce work so that we can become better and learn. I think to be creative is to be vulnerable, right? Whether you're an artist, whether you're a musician, whether you're a photographer, whatever it is, it demands a certain level of vulnerability because when you present something to the world, it's no longer yours. It's, it's out in the public. And people have to criticize it and they look at it and they're like, oh, I don't really like that. Or, oh, you should have done this. Or, oh, that's that. And so that takes a lot of thick skin and emotional maturity in order to take that criticism without it making you depressed and sad or making you feel like your self-worth is damaged as a result of that feedback. And I think that's an important word to keep in mind is feedback. One of the reasons why it's important to put yourself out there, whether it's with videography, like this YouTube channel I'm trying to create, or whether you're just presenting, sharing photos on Instagram, or you're submitting a piece of poetry, to a competition or whatnot. I think it's important to do those things because it demands a level of vulnerability that encourages you to learn and to grow. And if you want to become a professional in whatever discipline that you're hoping to do, I think it's necessary. So don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. Just put yourself out there, learn from the experience, and hopefully you've learned something about yourself and you'll do better the next time. Thank you for joining me in this video. I hope you enjoy this content and I hope you've learned something new. I hope you'll consider subscribing, and also I hope you join me on the next one. So hopefully I'll see you soon, and I'll catch you on the next one.